You're watching Glove Fist with boxing experts Frank Laterzo and Jack Hirsch. The best boxing show on the internet on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel. National Streaming Sports is brought to you in part by BetUs.com, designed for true fans. NFL odds, Week 1 and futures, college football odds, including Heisman Trophy favorites and playoff odds, NBA odds of division winners and playoffs, Major League Baseball playoff and World Series odds, the National Hockey League Conference playoffs and Stanley Cup odds, and boxing wagers. Betting opportunities include versus the spreads and outright winners, also during the game. Use our link on our website, nessp.info, the Bet Us Opportunities webpage, for a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits. Must be 21 years old, and remember, bet responsibly.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Laterzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Laterzo and Jack Hirsch.
Great opening. Jack hits me with his best shot, and I never flinch. Good evening. Welcome to Glove Fists. My name is Frank Laterzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of Emergency. You know, Jack, they used to call Jack Lambert Smiling Jack. I think you could be a Smiling Jack. You kind of have that little passive-aggressive smile. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, at times. So there's certain weeks we don't have as much to talk about as other weeks, and this might be one of them. I don't mean to scare anyone away. You know what I'm designating this show, Frank? Not as an official show, an exhibition. How's that for a segue? This is an exhibition, this show. No, it's not a...
I think it should be a celebration of all my great picks.
If you get the bet of me, it doesn't count, Frank, on this show, because it's an exhibition.
Jack, speaking of that, Mac's intro with the Bet Us, I just thought I would say college football starts this week. The NFL next week.
Frank. You're disregarding Georgia Tech winning at the buzzer.
Yeah, and that was somewhat of an upset, beating Florida State. But every year, because I do believe that my money can jinx something and maybe prevent it from happening. And to those that know that watch this show, know I'm a huge football fan, especially college football, but I like the NFL and I follow that. And the big weekend starts this week in college football. So every year I put down a bet on the Ohio State Buckeyes to win the championship. Okay? They are plus 380. So $100 pays you back 380. So I'm not going to say how much I bet.
But that's not such a good bet, Frank.
Jack, $100 to win 380?
To win 300, but the national championship is so hard to win. There are 12 teams in there, Frank.
But Jack, they're the number 1 or number 2 rated team in the country. They revamped their roster. They have a different quarterback, different offensive line. And there's so much pressure on Ryan Day. If they don't win it this year, he's fired. So long story short, I bet enough money to jinx Ohio State that if they win, I will win over $1,500. And if they lose, you can do the math. And I would rather pay the money because I loathe Ohio State that much. And Joe Bergman, I see your little eagle sign. And guess what? I'm coming for them next weekend when the season starts because I'm going to bet on them to win the Super Bowl and pray that I lose the bet.
I just want to say one thing and then we'll move on from any betting talk. Boxing is the only sport where the actual participant can bet on himself, and then no repercussions. Ryan Garcia was bragging at 6-1. He bet $2 million on himself and made $12 million against Devin Haney. Is it true or not? I'm not sure, but it does go on in boxing. And let me go a step further, Frank. If a fighter bet against himself and lost and collected, knowing the state of our sport, he'd probably get a 2-year suspension and be back.
And that would be it. Jack, before we get to the boxing, let me just say this. I think my bet is good. I think Ohio State is going to win the national championship. They're due, but I feel that every year. I think the hated Eagles are going to get to the Super Bowl and win the NFC. I'm not sure about winning the bowl, but I think that they're going to get there. And I'm one of those guys, Jack, that sometimes I enjoy my team. I'd rather have a team I don't like lose than a team I like. Like, I'm a big Miami Dolphins fan. I get more pleasure out of the Eagles losing than the Dolphins winning. And let me just close with this, because I was supposed to be on with Mac yesterday. I didn't get a chance.
Yeah, everyone out here, listen.
And we'll get a chance to do it. But let me just say this. Tua Tagovailoa is not a franchise quarterback. Mike McDaniels is not a head coach. And the Miami Dolphins, after making the playoffs the last 2 years, you would think the next step would be make the playoffs and advance a game. I say this year, they don't even make the playoffs. They can't beat teams at winning records. And as I said last year, they'll fold in December. Time's yours, as Andy Reid would say.
Very deceiving, Frank. When you said you wanted to talk about Tua, you've never really talked about him on this show. I thought you meant David Tua. So I was kind of thinking.
He's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, I didn't really quite about the Dolphins. Okay, Frank. The week's been
Jack, speaking of David Tua. Speaking of David Tua, now that you brought him up, I had some exchanges with Kevin Barry back in the day.
Oh, okay.
And I said to him, if you could tie David to a chair and make him watch Joe Frazier from 1969 to 1971 and embed it in his head, you'd have a world champion there. And he got back to me. He said, Frank, we try, fight night comes. He doesn't listen. David Tua was a guy I was very high on. I still think since George Foreman, he's one of the biggest single shot punchers in boxing history. And it's just amazing, Jack, that a guy like that with a cast iron chin and dynamite in both hands beat 4 world champions, but never won a title.
Well, I was in Atlantic City when he knocked out John Ruiz in 19 seconds.
So was I.
I was at the fight. Unfortunately, his big opportunity came against Lennox Lewis. And give Lennox Lewis credit. He fought very smartly and conservatively, Lennox Lewis. He didn't take any chances. He knew Tua was a big puncher, but can only hit him within a zone. He was like a zone puncher. Tua wasn't going to reach Lewis with long punches. And Lewis fought smartly and won comfortably on points, knowing that Tua had a great chin. He wasn't likely to knock him out. So Lewis fought an A+ fight that evening.
But if you think about Lennox Lewis, he fought 3 outstanding swarmers in Tua, Tyson, and Morrison, and none of those guys really competed with him. Like, for some reason, he was really good against swarmers.
Ibuchi, I'm getting tongue-tied, won a close decision over Tua.
I had it for Tua 6-5-1, but Ibuchi, Jack, is more of a boxer puncher.
Okay. Over this weekend, Frank, I watched it the following day. Mayweather's was back in the news. Boxing and exhibition. And I didn't know what to make out of it beforehand or after. They tried to make it look as real as possible beforehand, having the weigh-in, Jimmy Lennon announcing them and the whole bit. And I didn't know what to expect. It was the second go around with Floyd Mayweather and John Gotti the third. The first one ended where there was bedlam in the ring, and Gotti
WWE style
Mayweather's guts. Right, he said Mayweather's his enemy for life, and I kind of believed that because something got out of hand. It seemed in the ring the first fight, but for this rematch, I suspected something was a little off beforehand because Gotti was thanking Mayweather for the rematch, saying he kept his word, he didn't have to do it, and was all nice, and they were like touching gloves at the end of the round, and it was an exhibition officially, so I have no complaints about it. Anyone who wanted to get it, no complaints. Gotti fought a decent fight, under the circumstances, but he's an MMA guy. If he was a boxer his whole career, it would have helped, would have helped him a lot more, put it that way. But it's hard to make the transition from MMA to boxing. And he did about as good a job as you could do as far as the transition goes. But it's hard. And Floyd basically outboxed him during the time, during the fight and but I don't know whether both guys were throwing their better punches. I mean, Gotti threw a couple of good body punches, and I remember thinking, hey, that's a nice shot to the body, And then Floyd, I remember, unleashed one really hard right hand, like he put zip behind it to the chin. But it seemed to me like a a moderate to hard sparring session more than any fight. And I can't complain because it was called an exhibition. But the question's this with Floyd. If he had one loss on his record and he was as popular as he is now, let's say he was the face of boxing, but he had that one controversial loss early in his career for whatever reason, would he actually have returned to the ring in a big fight, not an exhibition? My feeling is he absolutely would, but he's not going to risk that O on his record, no matter how much money they throw at him.
Jack, I saw about 30 seconds clips of Mayweather and Gotti, and I saw enough to know that it was another farce. And all I'm saying to this, whoever sees this and has interest in Tyson and Paul, just remember what you saw with Gotti and Mayweather. It's going to be the same thing. It's not going to be a real fight. They're both going to walk away and claim they won, and they're both going to go on to make more money and help promote the sport of boxing. I think the Tyson Jake Paul thing is a work. I don't think it's going to be the fight that people say, and I think it's going to look like the 30 seconds I saw of Mayweather and Gotti.
Well, Tyson, when he had his exhibition with Roy Jones, we had no idea what to make of it beforehand. We really didn't. And as it turned out, they entertained Tyson and Jones. They both
came away with something, Jack.
Right, and the people who got it, figured, okay, those guys boxed at a brisk pace, even if it was a very hard sparring session type, of thing. But Tyson Paul, is it an exhibition or is it a real fight? That's what I want to know.
And Jack, they'll keep us guessing. They'll keep us guessing until the night of the fight, and then the next day they'll change it. They can do whatever they want. Who is going to stop them? They're going to call it a fight, an exhibition, a grudge match, whatever they want. But this is what I know, and call me a cynic. I believe it's about making money. And both of those guys need a good night for them to continue. Tyson is the ambassador, Jake Paul as sort of the sideshow boxer, okay? If Jake Paul kicks Mike Tyson's butt, Mike Tyson is kind of done that way, where if he looks good and hangs in there, he can do another exhibition. If Jake Paul gets demolished by Tyson, people will say, well, he fought as almost 60-year-old Tyson. He got beat by Tommy Fury. Is it Huey Fury or Huey Fury? And they're going to say, Was it Tommy?
Yeah.
Tommy. I get the Furies mixed up. Anyhow.
Yeah, Huey was not bad of a fighter, but yeah.
But the bottom line is this, Jack. If you like Mike Tyson and you're rooting for the old guy, you'll feel good after that. And if you're a young guy and you want to think that Jake Paul showed the establishment that he can hang with a real fighter, you'll feel good about that. At the end of the day, they're both going to go on and make money, but neither guy is going to get beat up by the other.
I'm going to tell you, if Tyson should knock Paul out, you know the type of excitement it would create. We were talking.
Oh, they'd match him against Usyk.
Let me tell you what would happen. The next day, that's what the NFL players would be talking about in the locker room before the game. Oh, man, did you hear what Tyson did yesterday? Oh, man. And they'd be coming out of the woodworks to fight Tyson for real. There'd be talk, well, maybe we could match him with Holyfield if he got his license because the ear-biting stuff. Maybe Canelo says, I'll move up to heavyweight and fight Tyson. He can weigh what he wants. Just all crazy stuff. For example, crazy stuff happens after the Mayweather-Gatti exhibition. Julio Cesar Chavez gets in the ring and he challenges Mayweather. Mayweather shut the talk down. You know, he shut it down pretty clearly. You know, he's a little old. It doesn't do me any good. But if Chavez boxed Mayweather, even in an exhibition, do you know how many people would want to turn out? One simple reason is they wouldn't believe that Chavez would give anything less than 100%. And the idea you see two legends. I gave this example a lot of times. Even Frank Sinatra, at the end of his career, when his voice was just a fraction of what it was, people would turn out for him. You know, it's kind of like a brand with these guys. But could you imagine? But you'd be smiling the next day, Frank. If Tyson knocked Paul out, you'd say, you know, he still got his punch. But
I'm not sure I would believe it, but yes, I would be. I would be rooting for Tyson, Jack, because Tyson's an old guy and I'm an old guy. I would be rooting for Tyson to do good, but I just think that's just not going to be the case. It just, you know, what Barnum and Bailey say, there's a sucker born every day or every minute. I think it's the same thing.
You think it's going to basically be prearranged?
Absolutely. And Joe Bergman, Jack can answer this better than I. But yes, Mayweather exchange. He got the referee fired. So talk about that, Jack.
In the second round, Mayweather throws a looping punch that hit Gatti behind the head. I didn't think it was a foul, you know, because how do you throw a punch from long range and hit a guy behind the head? You know, the guy has to kind of turn his head a certain way for it to happen. And even if and the referee warned, you know, Gotti signaled he was hit behind the head, you know, and the referee warned Mayweather, and Mayweather got angry with the ref. He slapped the ref's arm. Then they start arguing. Then the corners are on the ring apron. It's insane. Maybe because they're scared what happened the first fight could break out again the second time, and they didn't want that chaos to corner them in. But Mayweather had the authority. They got rid of the ref. They brought in a new ref. Mayweather demanded a new ref and got a new ref.
So do we need any more evidence to prove what a hoax that was? Because Ali couldn't do that in a real fight. Tyson couldn't do that in a real fight. Mayweather couldn't do that if it was a real fight. That was all part of the show. It was a joke.
I can't say myself what's what. It was 2-minute rounds. Listen, if it's called an exhibition, they can give you what they want. They can give you whatever they want. And I don't know the extent of how hard both guys were really trying to hit one another, how badly they wanted to hurt one another in the ring. You know, I just can't say. I mean, I remember Bernard Hopkins saying fighters have to learn to take power off their punches. They can't be throwing, you know, hard punches all the time. And I remember even when Ali fought Floyd Patterson the first time, a lot of people feel Ali carried Patterson. And if you look at the tape, Ali really wasn't punching that hard. But then there'd be other fights where Ali really wasn't punching that hard either.
But you could always stop, Jack, after landing. If you land 4 or 5 so-so punches like Ali did against Patterson, you can back off. No, I'm sorry. Exchanging the referee, to me, showed everybody that this is a carnival sideshow, and this is what you paid for. And I would be leery with the Tyson-Jake Paul fight. I want to see them both make money. I have no problem with people making money, but they're not going to make my money. I might buy a bad fight like what was the one you gave me a hard time?
Wait. You look at the rest of the Tyson Paul show. Katie Taylor against Amanda Serrano, the rematch. That's a heck of a good fight. I mean, and if they give you
that's legit. Yes.
If they give you a couple of other fights like that are good fights, you could easily rationalize it based on the quality. You could say, there's some good fights here. And Tyson Paul, I can stomach it. It's part of the show. And let's face it, it is the attraction. It is the thing that's most interesting from an entertainment viewpoint. Okay, we're talking about price-wise. Canelo and Edgar Berlanga, $90 price tag.
I'll buy that all day over Tyson Paul.
I wouldn't, okay? I mean, Ed Berlanga Canelo is a flagrant mismatch. I'm telling you, a flagrant mismatch. It's going to last as long as Canelo allows it to last. Berlanga on his own merit. If Canelo takes the fight to Berlanga, the best Berlanga can do, this is his absolute ceiling, is hanging for a few rounds at best. I mean, but I think Canelo stops him in a couple of rounds if he really wants to. And Canelo's in a no-win situation. If he beats Berlanga too easily, they're going to condemn the match. And he doesn't want Berlanga to pose any type of threat. You can't play around with a guy too long because Berlanga could punch a little bit. He's got a good chopping right hand. And if Canelo is napping and he holds his chin out, anything's possible. I gave you the best example, Joe Frazier, Manuel Ramos. They were, for 2 rounds, Ramos hung and he threw everything he had, but it only went 2 rounds at the end of the day. He couldn't last that long with Frazier under any scenario. But $90 price tag, if the chief support, Erislandy, Lara, Danny Garcia, both guys are long.
I have a little interest in that fight, Jack.
Garcia's long in the tooth, And then you got Raleigh Romero against a guy who's, not too well known, whose name I don't recall off the top of my head. It's just not. It's going to be a test of Canelo's drawing power. If the show flops, it's going to force him to fight better opposition. If Canelo can make big money on this fight, pay-per-view sales are high, he can keep doing this. And statistically speaking, Canelo can argue this is his 3rd straight undefeated opponent. So on paper, the fight's got merit on paper, okay? Put it that way.
Which I told you last year that would be the case. Berlanga would not be a star, but he would get a title shot because he can punch and he'll be undefeated. And that's all you need today.
Well, he's partly getting this. He's getting this opportunity in large part because he really doesn't punch that hard and
he's a perceived puncher.
The line fighter. Right. He had all the early KOs, and that was the gimmick. The 16 consecutive first-round KOs. He had that gimmick, and that pushed his career. And then he couldn't knock out anyone in 5 fights, Frank. So finally he stopped someone, and they thought, let's throw him in with Canelo now before he loses to someone, But
I wonder how much Canelo cares, Jack, because he dictates everything. He makes so much money. And there's a part of me that still believes, because Terrence Crawford did not look like an all-time great in his last fight, I do think there's a part of me that thinks that maybe Canelo, after the fight, he's going to have to say, okay, who do I go? Do I go Beterbiev? Morrell? Do I go Bivol, the winner of that fight? Do I go Crawford? And I think he might. I don't think the Crawford Canelo fight is dead because of how Terrence Crawford didn't look. Even though I think he won and there's no case for a draw or loss, the bottom line is he did not look unbeatable in that fight. And I think that might give Canelo some confidence.
Yeah, I mean, you see Canelo looking at Chris Eubank Jr. as talked about before, because it came down to him and Berlanga. Eubank Jr. in the United States would be a dreadful matchup. Could you see Canelo actually going to the UK, doing something a little different? And if he fought Eubank Jr., that would go over big because it's a new country for him. So even I would have a hard time criticizing Canelo if the fight was in the UK, because he's going to a new part of the world. So in a way, I'd say, okay.
He could pull it off. His fans will buy it.
They love it in England. You'll get 50,000 people in the stadium in England or whatever. And
well, I can tell you this much, Jack. There are two reasons, and you can bet your bottom dollar on this, and I know you're going to disagree, that I am not getting Canelo and Berlanga. Do you believe that?
You've been known to fold on the day of the fight, Frank.
Okay, you're right.
I'm going to use the line that Don King used about Chuck Wepner before the fight with Muhammad Ali. Wepner said he was going to win, and King said, "We're confident that he's confident." And I'm confident that I believe that you believe you're not going to get it. Maybe
okay.
You won't. Maybe
so
you're
here's
going to want to see the Garcia-Lara fight. You're going to start thinking, and maybe they'll add on another. Well, it's kind of late in the game to add on another quality.
I'm going to give you the two reasons that guarantee I will not get the fight. Number one, college football is back, and and I believe the conference games start on the 14th. Okay, so there's probably a good SEC matchup that night. That'll keep me away, and then maybe even the bigger reason that will keep me away from getting the fight is it's on Amazon Prime, and I don't know how to order Amazon Prime, and I don't know how to play with the passwords or anything. And I know I tried the last time. I got disgusted. I didn't do it, and I said, the heck with it. And that's going to happen this time.
Yeah, that's pretty pathetic, Frank. Not you, that we have to order that way. I've had in the past my wife bail me out when I wanted to order something. I'm having a hard time ordering it, and I'm thinking, take my darn money. I want to give you
exactly. I want to give it away, and they won't. And you can't.
Still can't order it. What you should do, Frank, a little tip. This is what I do. They have pay-per-view channels on your cable carrier. Find out in advance, hit the guide, and scan ahead to the night of the fight, and it's going to show you the channel. And all you have to do is hit your remote, basically. You can order that way.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Even if a fight's on the zone, for example, even if you don't have the zone, you can order it, in the cable.
I've tried that, Jack, and I've had no success.
Well, it's too far out to scan ahead.
The practice now, right?
Well, but find out which is the, pay-per-view channels. Find out from your carrier. Or another thing you can do, and this makes it harder. This is the old-fashioned way. You could call up your carrier and speak to the representative and say you want to order this and this. Can they put in the order, and you'll be charged in advance, and then it'll just come on.
Jack, because there's not much going on, and I might as well just get this out. Facebook has been taking my Glove Fist post down. I don't know why. So I didn't put anything up. So we didn't really have a schedule. You had mentioned that you wanted to speak about what was the better Olympic team between the 76 or the 84 team. And we can get to that. But I want to try something because I want to see where we end up on this. Are you good?
Yeah, sure.
Who were the 3 top heavyweights of the 1950s? I'll give you mine. You tell me yours. I'm going to say Marciano, Walcott, and Charles.
Well, Marciano's obvious. 1950s.
So 50 to 59.
Marciano. And I know Marciano, I guess, is number 1 because of the few years. Now, I would say you're talking about, you know who I'm going to put in the list who you didn't mention? How about Sonny Liston? I got
Would you
with that
put
one, right? Sonny Liston. No one wanted to fight him. He was avoided. You
But
mean to
Jack,
tell
when was
me-
he a factor? About 1958. So that's just 58 or 59.
Let me go. Listen, if in 1959 he fought Floyd Patterson, who would you pick?
No, I didn't have Patterson in there.
Listen. No.
No, I had
He would have
Marciano,
beaten
Walcott, and
Liston. He would
Charles.
have beaten Johansson. I mean, Charles lost the title to Walcott in 51. And Charles was a declining fighter. You know, when he fought Marciano twice for the title, he gave him 2 really good fights, but he wasn't a peak as a Charles anymore. You know, he wasn't even a peak as a Charles at any point when he was a heavyweight. Was at his best of life. But I'd have to say Jersey Joe Walcott's in there. And,
Okay.
And I'd say Liston, but if we're going to disregard Liston, then it's Floyd Patterson, because I think the Patterson at its peak in the 50s was better than a little past its peak as a Charles. Charles in its prime was better than Patterson in Patterson, but you're talking about only
Okay.
the 50s, not addressing the 40s.
All right, Jack. I put Patterson in there. I mean Charles in there, but you know what? There's a case for Charles. I mean Patterson. I'll go with that. Okay. 1960s. I had Ali, Liston, Frazier.
1960s. Well, yeah, a Foreman we have to disregard, even though he turned pro 69. So he's a non-factor, obviously. Well, in the 60s, obviously it's Ali. You know, Liston and Frazier. You know, I mean, Ali number 1, but you can debate between Liston and Frazier.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the 3. Yeah, I mean, is anyone I'm missing by some chance in the 60s?
No.
You could make a little argument for. I can't think of anyone.
All right. So, and the 1970s would be Ali, in my opinion, Ali, Foreman, and Frazier.
Yeah, before making that automatic, we're talking about the 70s. Yeah, Ken Norton entered my mind for a moment, but obviously you can't put him ahead of Foreman, who obliterated him. You can't
Or
put
Frazier.
him ahead of Frazier with that 1971 and, you know, from 70, you know, those performances against Ellis Ali, and even in the losses to Ali, you know, but you're talking about 70s, 1970s. Wait a second. Can we possibly make a case for Larry Holmes in there?
Jack, you can make a case for anybody you want. I mean, I had Frazier third.
But maybe make it. I'd have to give it a lot of thought, because if I told you, Frank, hypothetically, and I'm not saying I'm saying this, Larry Holmes, rate him ahead of George Foreman. Larry Holmes beat Ken Norton in that epic fight in the late 70s, and I guess the early 80s when he established himself more so. Okay, so I agree with
Larry
you.
Holmes was champ for a year and a half of the 80s.
Okay.
That doesn't knock out Ali, Frazier, Foreman. I mean, in the 70s. 70s.
Okay.
All right.
Agree.
Let's skip the 80s. The 1990s, I had Lewis, Holyfield, and Tyson.
Yeah. I mean, you can we consider Riddick Bowe in that group for any reason?
I can't, because the window's just too short, too small.
Okay. Let me play devil's advocate, Frank. You're big on analytics and you're big on stats, right?
Go ahead.
Riddick Bowe only lost 1 fight in his career to a man, Evander Holyfield, who he beat 2 other times. He won every other fight in his career, even though we don't think of him as such because we remember the 2 Golota fights where he took beatings, but he did get the W by disqualification. The bottom line is he did win those fights, and they weren't. And Golota was not robbed. Golota earned his disqualification.
I can't put Riddick Bowe above Lewis, Holyfield, or Tyson. The window's just too short.
I can't do it either. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Okay. 2000s. From 2000 to 2009, I have Lewis, Klitschko, Vladimir Klitschko, and then Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, if you combine the 2 Klitschkos, their record, and make them into one man, you're talking, I think, about maybe a top 5 heavyweight of all time. For sure.
Okay.
If you combine the 2 Klitschkos, but I agree with what you said, Frank.
All right, how about 2010 to 2019? I had Vladimir, Fury, and Joshua.
Vladimir, yeah, shows you how Vladimir, Fury, and Joshua. Yeah, if I want to play devil's advocate, if I said, look, I'd rate Deontay Wilder ahead of Joshua.
Not a big argument from me.
Right.
Possible.
He knocked out all the guys, and look what happened with Joshua with the Andy Ruiz, and then and Wilder was the one who always tried to get the biggest fights. He never steered clear of anyone. He never got the chance if I Usyk or this guy, that guy. And keep in mind, Joshua did duck Wilder during that time.
Okay, so you could make a case for Wilder. So it's Vladimir, Fury, and then Joshua / Wilder. Make your pick. Okay.
Yeah.
2020s. I had Usyk, Fury, and Joshua. So from 20s to now, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Jack, I took you all through that for one reason. We skipped the 80s. The 80s is clearly Holmes and Tyson. Henry and I were going back and forth on this. Who's that third guy? We came up with Witherspoon. Can you come up with somebody who could knock him off like you did Joshua?
Or why not Michael Spinks? The 2 fights with Holmes, even though I thought Holmes should have gotten a decision to rematch, it was a relatively close fight to rematch. And he did knock Holmes' unbeaten run, and then he stopped Cooney. Okay, that was a nice win still. Because going into that fight, it was pretty much an even money fight.
Right.
And to get a blitter and Tyson knocking Spinks out, that was Tyson's signature performance, of his career. No disgrace getting nailed by Tyson.
My argument.
We don't think of him as a heavyweight. What about
Jack,
for a little while? Pinklin Thomas was doing well for a little while.
Let me just address Spinks first. My argument for Witherspoon over Spinks is Witherspoon nearly beat a much better version of Holmes, and he was just more of a factor during the 80s from beginning to end and has better wins than Spinks across the board for a decade. That's why I put Witherspoon there.
I can't argue. I mean, we think of Witherspoon as being a real heavyweight. We think of Spinks as being a manufactured heavyweight.
Okay, so
a light heavyweight that moved up.
I didn't give Spinks nearly the consideration you did, but who are the other candidates? Dokes, Page, Tucker, Coetzee, Pinklin Thomas, Tony Tubbs. Is there anybody, and Cooney? Is there anybody we can make a case? So let's try to knock Witherspoon off.
Pinklin Thomas defeated Witherspoon when they were both in their primes. They fought. They were both in their primes, and he outpointed them. And keep this in mind, Larry Holmes, he avoided. He ducked Pinklin Thomas. It was at the end of Holmes's career, and he was picking his spots, and he didn't want any part of Pinklin Thomas. It was too risky a fight, you know. Maybe if Holmes were younger, I'm sure he would have taken the challenge on. But at that point in his career, he was interested in remaining unbeaten and, you know, and just having the show continue. But then he lost Trevor Berbick.
Berbick was in there too, but I don't think he had the cakes over Witherspoon.
No, but he did beat Pinklin Thomas. But Pinklin Thomas had substance abuse problems at that point, and it caught up to him.
All right, let me just see something because. All right, Witherspoon. I have his record in front of me. Alfonso Ratliff, Ronaldo Snipes, close fight with Holmes, beat Floyd Jumbo Cummings, killed Tillis, beat Page, lost a majority decision to Thomas, KO James Broad, beat James Smith, beat Tony Tubbs, knocked out Frank Bruno, had that bad night against Bone Crusher. Andrew Eklund knocked him out. Jeff Sims knocked him out. Ribalda beat him. Carl the Truth Williams, he beat him.
I have one for you that you'll be flabbergasted with this selection. Make believe that it was like the NFL draft, and we were both in our draft room, and we had to draft the third heavyweight. You and your coaching staff would be going over all the things I would reach for a fighter. You know who I'd reach for? Who would turn out to maybe be the best of all of them? 1980s we're talking about, right? You're flabbergasted. Teofilo Stevenson. I would go to the amateurs and think this guy can beat the others because he was still fighting. He was going to go in the 84 Olympics, but they boycotted it, the Cubans. He was going to go for his fourth gold medal in a row. It would have been a gamble pick. He might not have panned out at all, but he may have brought his greatness up to the pro level in the early 80s, for all we know. And that may have been my dark horse candidate that I maybe would have really reached for.
Well, he didn't turn pro, so we really can't have him in this discussion. But who won the gold in 84? Tyrell Biggs?
Yeah, Tyrell Biggs.
And Stevenson beat him twice.
Right, exactly. He would have probably won the gold, Stevenson. We don't know whether he would have still been a prime Stevenson. But it's hard, you know, and these other Cuban heavyweights haven't always panned out, I don't have to tell you. But something about Stevenson, he was long, he was rangy. It's hard to believe he wouldn't have been an impact heavyweight. You know,
all right, so pro. I was thinking about this, about the top three heavyweights since the 50s in each decade, and the only one where I really couldn't come to a conclusive number three was the 1980s. Now, you made a good point. I'd have to go back and look at it, you know, regarding the 50s with Charles and Patterson.
You made me think of other decades. I don't know why I just thought of the 1920s. I'll say Dempsey, Tunney, Harry Wills. Three best heavyweights of the 1920s.
I thought about that, yes.
Yeah,
and who were the 30s? Lewis, Schmeling, and who? Baer?
Schmeling, automatic. Max Baer did stop him in 10 rounds. Was Schmeling, I mean, because Schmeling beat Lewis, do we automatically say he was top three? Could I put Max Baer ahead of him? But Jack Sharkey, was he?
And Sharkey's in the running too.
Sharkey may have been more accomplished than Schmeling over his whole career, perhaps. But then again, Schmeling had one great noteworthy achievement outside of Lewis. He, in his only title defense, he stopped young Stribling in 15 rounds, the only fighter to stop young Stribling in Stribling's long career.
So I would say it's Lewis and Schmeling, and we got to go for the debate who the third guy was, Baer or Sharkey.
You're disregarding Jimmy Braddock, I guess, even though he beat Baer. He only had one run of a few wins all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Baer or Sharkey. I would go with Baer was so much more charismatic. I think, I'll go with Bear over Sharky. Sharky had a draw with Mickey Walker. I couldn't see Mickey Walker holding Bear to a draw. Sharky was real good. He was better in the 1920s, put it that way. So I'll get out of it that way. And the 1910s to 1920s, obviously Jack Johnson. I can still say Jack Dempsey the decade before too. Are we allowed to have a fighter go overlap the 2 decades?
Well, we have a couple that did that.
Oh, we did. Right. We did. So Dempsey also, because in the lead up to Jess Willard in 1919, he had a streak of some good fights. And who else would be in that decade? Guys I can't vote for, like a fireman Jim Flynn. Some of the black.
How about Willard?
There was this newspaper.
He did beat Jeff Johnson.
I don't know whether you ever heard of Flash Gordon, Malcolm Flash Gordon. He put out a newsletter. He was the most radical writer in boxing history. Radical. And it was like an underground paper. He'd get arrested, he'd sell it, but he'd be chock full of news. He was so influential. And I remember what he said about Jess Willard. When Jack Dempsey passed away, instead of Flash giving Jack Dempsey a nice obituary, he rips into Dempsey. He says Dempsey was overrated. It wasn't his fault that he beat one big piece of bleep, Jess Willard, for the heavyweight title. And Willard could not have won a New York City sub-novice Golden Glove title. That's what he put down.
That's pretty rough.
That was pretty rough. But Willard...
Jack, here's one for you. And you just stimulated my mind. Who's the most overrated heavyweight champ in history? In your opinion.
I know you're going to think Primo Carnera, but
But do people say he's great? No one says he's great. I don't think he's overrated.
Carnera, the most overrated. Oh, you're thinking maybe Jack Johnson.
He would be first on my list.
Most overrated. I mean, it's what they've done during their times, Frank, during their era. Right. I mean, that's how you define greatness. Like some people want to compare Rocky Marciano, but during his era, he was considered a great heavyweight champion.
And that's all you can do, and that's all he can do is beat the guys in the 50s.
Jim Jeffries was considered a great heavyweight champion during his era. I mean, so you're talking about, no, if you're going to tell me Tommy Burns, no. Tommy Burns was underrated. I watched film of Tommy Burns. He, to me, is one of the more underrated heavyweight champions.
I wasn't thinking Tommy Burns.
Oh, John L. Sullivan. You got me.
Are you talking, now we're talking overrated. My overrated would be Jack Johnson, but that's not fair because I'm going by the films I've seen of him. And in fact, Ben Dowdy and I have had this conversation, and we just don't see the films don't belie the story that we've read. So to me, it would be Jack, and I hold it against him that he dodged all the good black fighters when they were in their prime. He fought them when they were young. He would be my most overrated. And for you, it would be who?
Most overrated. Oh, boy.
Now, remember, Jack, for them to be overrated, I'm thinking that they have to be considered one of the top 10 greats. And maybe they don't belong there.
Okay, I'll tell you who. Jack Dempsey. And that's not a popular choice. And
no, it's not. I'm kind of surprised you went there. Why?
He never fought Harry Wills. Never fought Harry Wills. Reportedly, he once had a contract that he agreed to fight Wills, but his promoter, Tex Rickett, didn't want him to fight Wills. His manager, Jack Hearns, didn't want him to. He could have stepped up and insisted on it, the way Floyd Patterson insisted on fighting Liston. That's why he had a falling out with Customato. Floyd Patterson had arguably the biggest heart of any heavyweight champion in history, the most pride, arguably, of any heavyweight champion in history for what he did taking Liston on. He knew what he was up against, but his thing was he earned a shot. If I'm a real champion, I got to take on anyone, the best guy available. Kudos to Patterson. But but you look at some of Dempsey's fights too. He got knocked out of the ring, with Louis Angel Furfo, and Dempsey.
But he did knock him down 7 times, right. Jack, and knocked him out.
But he did. But the point is, he didn't fight Harry Wills. And there's a good chance Harry Wills would have defeated Dempsey. And later Dempsey says, "Oh, I would have knocked him out. I fought really well against big fellas." It wouldn't have been Jess Willard. Harry Wills was one of the great heavyweights of his era, but he was black, and he followed Jack Johnson, and that's why he didn't get his opportunity. I will say this about Dempsey, complimenting him this way: if I threw this question at you, who was the most exciting heavyweight champion in history? Pure excitement. Who would you say?
I mean, most people would say either probably Dempsey or Tyson.
Exactly. That's why they love watching the clips of Tyson. But look at Dempsey's fights, the Willard fight. You can watch that all day, the knockdowns. And then the controversy was his gloves loaded, getting knocked out of the ring against Willard in spectacular fashion. They got that great part, and then knocking Willard out, going to Shelby, Montana. Tommy Gibbons, dull fight, but one of the great stories in boxing that accompanied the fights, the long count. Oh, in your opinion, would Tunney have gotten up before the count of 10? Had referee Dave Barry counted immediately? Had Dempsey gone to a neutral corner? I
believe so. The way he looked up, he seemed to me very coherent.
I believe so too. Next question: would Tunney have?
And then he knocked Dempsey down in the next round.
Would Tunney have survived the rest of the round once he got up? And if he didn't have,
I think so.
I think so too. So that could have been the best thing to ever happen to Dempsey. The controversy of the long count kind of like added to the Dempsey legend and made him kind of so iconic. And even against Jack Sharkey, we were talking about. Sharkey's complaining to the referee. Dempsey's hitting him low. He turns to complain and boom.
Then knocks him out.
Hit with a left hook and gets knocked out. And that is the epitome of protect yourself at all times.
All right, Jack. My other question would be this. Who's the most underrated heavyweight champ?
I think Tommy Burns. I've seen him on film. He actually, for an old timer, looks good. He was a little guy. That's why he couldn't compete with Jack Johnson. Yeah, it was like Jack Johnson would tie him up in the clinches. But Tommy Burns had some 8 title defenses against decent guys during, his time. But no one talks about Tommy Burns. They made it out like it was a charity. He was a charity case against Jack Johnson.
His career is a light heavyweight, and the heavyweight defenses get overlooked. No doubt about that.
And let me ask you this. When we talk about Jack Johnson overrated, it drives me crazy. Jim Jeffries was out of the ring for 6 years, and he was age 35. And everyone is gloating about how great Johnson was, how he dominated. So why does Ali get a pass against Smoking Joe Frazier for being out of the ring a little over 3 years and having 2 comeback fights before that, and only being 29 years old? Ali gets a pass by these people who say, "Oh, he would have beaten Frazier easily," which he wouldn't.
I agree.
Have done. But Jim Jeffries gets no pass at all.
Jack, because of the times, and they wanted to plaster St. Jack Johnson too. I really do believe that.
Why doesn't Tyson get a pass? He was out 3 years before he fought Holyfield, but Ali gets a pass.
But Tyson did have 4 fights though, Jack. And Holyfield was coming off his worst fight, where Frazier was in his prime.
Okay, yeah.
So go ahead. So your most underrated would be is Tommy Burns. All right, my most underrated comes down to 2. Sonny Liston, and I think Smokin' Joe. And I say Smokin' Joe because I think it's all the Foreman fight. If you take that fight off of Joe Frazier's resume, it's really hard to make a case that he's an underdog to anybody else. But that fight kind of showed or made people believe he couldn't beat a big puncher who with a good uppercut, who he had to carry the fight to. And as far as Sonny Liston, I think after Joe Louis, he's the second best, greatest boxer puncher. Liston was an outstanding boxer with a natural aptitude for fighting. And what ruins him is that Cassius Clay, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali, or vice versa, came along and he was a victim of the consensus greatest of all time. So to me, it comes down to Liston and Frazier simply as fighters.
No, I disagree with you. I'm going to tell you why, Frank. Most people, are going to rate Liston and Frazier in their top 10 in the bottom part. Like you look at the top 10 ratings.
Yeah, they're at the bottom.
Frazier 8, 9, 10, 6, 7. Liston, same thing. If you want to talk underrated, no one rates Vladimir Klitschko as a top 10 fighter. And what did he make? Like 20 defenses or something? He went like a decade or so not losing a fight. But you look at
Give me his best win, Jack.
But I'm not going to argue that, okay, Frank? But what else could he have done? Did he duck anyone during that time? He did only what he could
did
do.
not.
I mean, so why are we holding it against him because he didn't, come up during an era where there was a great opponent? And his best opponent, one guy he could have fought. He wasn't going to fight his brother. Everyone gives him a pass on that.
I mean, I guess you could make a case for Vladimir, Jack, although he had some horrible losses. But
right, no one.
I mean, it's up there.
No one puts him in their top 10. Even you.
No, they hold his opposition against them, and the way he lost.
When we first started doing the show, we talked about a hypothetical fight. You and I, and everyone agreed with you and not me. Who would have won between Vladimir Klitschko and Evander Holyfield? We'll never know. You said Holyfield, and I thought, maybe Klitschko is a big, strong guy, could control him. I don't know whether I would have been right or not in that fight. There's a good chance Holyfield would have won also. I know that. But why wasn't Klitschko given more respect when we were debating that? I remember everyone jumped on your side, like virtually everyone. It should have been closer to 50-50 with the comments that people made. But I was out there practically all by myself.
But it's hard when Holyfield has wins over the best Foreman during his comeback. Tyson, he beat Bo in his prime. Even though he lost him, he still beat him. Yeah. I mean, he just has better wins. So, and that's how you have to break the tie on guys that can't fight or aren't going to fight.
So
Holyfield's hard, Jack. I think that's the other thing people take into it. Okay, it's kind of hard to picture Vladimir knocking him out.
I could see there being a good chance of Holyfield winning. So, I'm not going to go there with that. But the point is, how many fighters in boxing history do we hold it against them who've, been successful over a long period of time and didn't really have monster victories?
All right. Both Klitschko's. I guess you could say Tommy Burns. I guess you could say Patterson.
Well, Patterson had the chance for the monster victory and got obliterated by Liston. That would have been his monster win. But look, let's talk about the greatest fight of all time, Sugar Ray Robinson. We only have a moment. Yeah, we could start debating how many monster victories he had in his career, but that's something maybe for next week.
Jack, what did you say again? The greatest fighter of all time. What was his name?
Well, with Sugar Ray Robinson.
You say it's not written in stone, but that's who you went to.
It's not written in stone, but I'm going to give you that. But I'll put it this way. Robinson beating LaMotta was not as impressive, let's say, as Harry Greb beating Mickey Walker. I mean, I'm not talking about the action inside the ring. Greb beat Mickey Walker, I think, was a greater fighter than LaMotta at their similar points in both guys' career. But yeah,
but Robinson spotted him 16 pounds.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. Hopefully we have more to talk about next week. And great show. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.